All right, we are back from recess, and we are welcoming Robert Mayer, Eugene Levin, and Eliana Nahoumi for a discussion on the immigrant Jewish experience, Israelis, Russian Jews, and Persian Jews in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for joining us today. And you can go in the order that you see fit.
Sure. I'll start. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, commissioners, for inviting me to share this perspective of Israeli-American immigrants living in Massachusetts. And thank you for your leading this commission. Okay.
Thank you.
So I just want to mention, you are the first legislator in the country to do this, and we commend you for that. And no pressure, everybody's going to look up to you. My name is Robert Mayer. I moved from Tel Aviv to Boston 30 years ago. I'm a tech entrepreneur, the national co-chair of the ICAN, the Israeli-American Civic Action Network, and a former IDF officer and Desert Storm veteran. Like many Israelis, I came here by choice, not necessity. We share common values and ambitions. I wanted to broaden my horizon, and let's be honest, enjoy a bit more space. I like to joke that here you can drive for 3 hours north and you end up in Lebanon, New Hampshire. In Israel, you end up in Beirut, Lebanon. And it's a slightly different experience. People ask, what is the difference between American Jews and Israeli Americans? And I'd like to quote Ellen Gold, the stand-up comedian, who said it best: American Jews return merchandise, Israeli return fire. Israeli have a very specific life experience. Every Israeli lived through war or terror. My first memory as a child is running to a bomb shelter during the Yom Kippur War, and my father jumping into a Patton tank to defend our country. At 18, during the first Intifada, I had a terrorist in my rifle sights. It's a growing up experience. Later, I served during the Iraqi ballistic missile attacks. We literally live the ancient line: in every generation, they rise up to destroy us. It's not a metaphor. We live it, and we felt it again on October 7th. I'd like to add maybe another thing from something that came up in my mind when I listened this morning, which was excellent. We also don't grow up with the minority mindset, which is very different. And when we come here, because we come to a country that is an ally, is a democracy, is pluralistic, we don't come with the minority mindset. We come to a country that it's great to be here. We love it here. I'd like to start about a recent visit to this building when a legislator told our Israeli-American delegation, "I never thought of you as constituents or as voters." I appreciated her honesty, but that comment revealed the truth many of us feel, that Israeli Americans are part of the Commonwealth success story, yet too often ignored. This commission has done serious commendable work, and I thank you for it, sincerely. But one moment in your hearings stood out to me, when a former ambassador, speaking as a Jew, claimed that the anti-Semitism and its synonymous anti-Zionism we're seeing is really just anger at Israel's government. He called Israel's defensive war political, even as Hamas held hostages and my own family were under fire, basically dismissing democracy as its rightful existential struggle. Most of you pushed back, some did not. Israel has made some significant progress in recent months in restoring spinal injuries, but unfortunately, it has not figured out yet how to grow a backbone. That distinction between Israel and the Jews may sound academic, but for us Israelis, it's existential. It dehumanizes us. It treats my historical and ancestral homeland, Israel, not as a democracy of people, but as a symbol, something you can condemn freely because its citizens are invisible. Israel and Zionism is not an abstraction. It's our families and friends, our history, and our graves. To pretend otherwise doesn't reduce anti-Semitism, it excuses it. There are roughly 30,000 Israeli Americans living in Massachusetts alone. We are scientists, doctors, engineers, restaurateurs, small business owners. A 2016 study found that Israeli-founded companies contribute about $20 billion to the state economy. And that number has just grown since. But today, some of us quietly wonder if we have a future here. We've experienced anti-Semitism even at the workplace. Years ago, it was about Jews and money, control over the media, and one of the most intriguing to me was when I was told, I don't know what you are, but you're not white. okay, or you're not an American. You know, it's the classic hits. But now our kids are targeted. They are called Zionists as a slur. Your parents are baby killers. Some schools teach that our homeland is colonial, when every rock or hole that is dug proves exact opposite. And when Israelis are murdered, too many ask, what did they do to provoke it? These experiences differ from those of American Jews who have lived here for generations, experienced white supremacy, and frankly, I think they were also caught completely unprepared to the new style of anti-Semitism. We carry with us the memory of war, loss, and resilience. We don't have the luxury to debate identity. We must fight to survive. Massachusetts has long been a friend to Israel, economically, culturally, but that friendship has gaps. We still have no anti-BDS statute protecting Israeli-American businesses. I personally face that as a CEO here. There's like, I think 30-something states in the country already that have anti-BDS laws. The Commonwealth Genocide Education Law, while well-intentioned, ended up being a failure as it leaves Holocaust education optional and has opened the door to politicized, inaccurate content. And we need inclusion of Israelis, Russian, Mizrahi, and Persian Jewish voices in every state initiative on anti-Semitism and Jewish inclusion. And of course, October 7th changed everything. It revealed not only a surge in anti-Semitism, but a collapse of civilized society and the loss of our moral compass. Educators and civic leaders who would condemn hatred in any other context struggled, equivocated, or even celebrated. That was not a debate about policy. It was a failure of humanity. This is not only a Jewish problem, it is a civic crisis. It exposed extreme ignorance and distorted values among our young generation. This should concern everybody and not just the Jews. It may start with us, but it never ends with us. Israeli Americans are not victims, we are contributors. We chose Massachusetts, we love this Commonwealth, we add to its economy, to its innovation, and its cultural life. But if anti-Semitism becomes unbearable, we have another home. And history shows what happens when Jews start packing. So I urge this commission, do not separate anger at Israel from hatred of people who live there. Because for us, our family, there is no difference. And finally, please, anti-Semites have to make a choice. We are either white colonialists or hummus eaters who 2,000 years ago lived in Jerusalem and plotted to kill Jesus. At least we've established that Israelis invented hummus. And I tell you, I make the best hummus if you're interested. My friend from Abu Dhabi can attest to that. Thank you for your work, your integrity, and your commitment to protecting all families in the Commonwealth, including mine.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Eliana Nahoumi, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I am here representing the Persian Jewish community. Yes, Persian Jews exist, and I feel the need to clarify that because throughout my life, I've been repeatedly told by both Jews and non-Jews that I'm the first Persian Jew that they'd ever met, which is absurd to me because Jews have lived in Iran since the 6th century BCE. My mother was born in Iran before the Islamic Revolution. She fled her home in the middle of the night because life for Jews in post-revolution Iran had become unbearable. My grandfather was accused of being a spy for Israel and the United States, and he was arrested by the IRGC, tortured and imprisoned for many months. After a year, he'd become so frail from the treatment that he could no longer survive, and they put him on house arrest. And that moment allowed my mother and her family to be smuggled out of Iran. She came to the United States hoping to give her children the opportunity to grow up in an environment where they don't have to hide their identity or fear harassment for who they are. Unfortunately, that was not my reality after October 7th. I recently graduated from American University in Washington, D.C., and in the weeks following the horrific attacks in Israel, I faced accusations of genocide, direct harassment from peers, and social isolation. In my Persian language class, a classmate who I had known since the previous year stood up and screamed at me in front of everyone, claiming that my people were killing Palestinian children and that I had blood on my hands. In a state of shock, I told her that I was born in America and I happen to be Jewish, and that I don't really appreciate those anti-Semitic remarks. She dismissed me by insisting that she's not anti-Semitic, she's anti-Zionist. But how can someone accuse an American-born Jew of having blood on her hands and then claim that it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism? I also couldn't ignore the painful irony that a Muslim Iranian student, someone whose community is free to practice openly in America, felt empowered to accuse me of atrocities when my own family was forced to escape Iran because of religious persecution. That was just the first of many instances of anti-Semitism I witnessed firsthand after October 7th. And although it was deeply distressing, I can't say I was shocked, because not one person stood up for me. Not a single classmate said anything, they just sat there silently. And my professor wasn't present during the incident, but when I told her what happened, her response was neutral, essentially that we can't control other people's actions. After graduating college, I knew that I wanted to spend time in Israel, so this past summer, I participated in an internship program that was supposed to last 2 months. However, I was forced to leave after just 1 week because Iran launched thousands of missiles towards Israel, and I spent 2 sleepless nights in the bomb shelter before being evacuated to the south because a building on my block had been destroyed by missiles, by an Iranian missile. Even in the Jewish homeland, I found myself sheltering from Iranians' Islamic ballistic missiles. If there's one thing I took away from that experience, is that I refuse to be silent and let those things happen and not say anything. Silence allows hatred to grow, and as long as we stay silent, nothing will change. Thank you.
Eugene?
Good morning. My name is Eugene Levin. Of course, I'd like to thank the Commission for the wonderful work you're doing and for the opportunity to speak here today.
Eugene, could you bring the
just
microphone just a little
yes.
closer to you?
So it's a true honor to be here, but also a deeply painful and sad necessity to address you on a subject that I wish I never had to bring up again in my lifetime, a virus called antisemitism. It's a mutating virus that takes shapes of and adapts to the situation in society, as we know. I'm a refugee from the former Soviet Union, came to the United States in 1989 at the age of 16. I arrived here with my family, my parents, my grandparents, and we were seeking freedom. We left because Jews in USSR experienced decades and centuries of discrimination, fear, and violence and exclusion. And America was always seen as a beacon of hope for us, the place where we believed such hatred had no place. And never in my wildest dreams I could imagine that decades later I would find myself facing the same hatred once again that I believed we left behind in the USSR. I am a grandson of Holocaust survivors from both sides of my family, from Latvia and Ukraine. Entire branches of our families were exterminated. For example, my grandfather, Moses Berkovich, a sole survivor of the family, he lost 19 members of his family, and the massacre wasn't carried out by the Germans, but by the neighbors, by the Latvians. It was done before the Germans even made it to the town. In Latvia and in Lithuania, most of the Jews were murdered not by the Germans, but by the neighbors, people who lived next to them for generations. And the legacy of the memory of Holocaust and my and the current day denial and distortion events in Latvia and Lithuania compelled me to produce and direct a documentary called Baltic Truth. It confronts Holocaust distortion in the Baltic states, and it's now available on Amazon Prime. October 7th came later, of course, and again, the world turned against the Jews, and Jews were slaughtered because they're Jews. This past June, I ended up in Israel, and again, under attack, but this time by Iran. So I was in Israel from June 6th until June 23rd. Felt every explosion in Tel Aviv and Bat Yam. Twice the impacts were within 500 yards of where we were staying. Living under the direct threat made me painfully, painfully realize how quickly the virus mutates and transforms into violence against the Jews. And it pushed me to start another documentary called Ashes of Identity about the global rise of anti-Semitism, not only in the Middle East and Europe, but unfortunately here in our backyard, in our Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is also not theoretical for my family. After I published an article on Times of Israel condemning the Natick High School walkout for Free Palestine, my home in Dover was vandalized. Somebody actually drove by my house, took Polaroid pictures of the house, wrote, "Shame on you, Free Palestine," and they left it on my doorstep. And far worse, on August 10th, my wife was physically assaulted at Harvard Square during I call it a mob for Free Palestine. Somebody noticed her Star of David. She ended up being physically assaulted. We approached the police officers that were standing nearby. We were able to ID the individual who was standing 10 feet away from us. And there's nothing. Nothing has been done up until today by Cambridge Police. The excuse, we are too busy. We can't identify the individual, even though we identified the individual right there. It sends a chilling message to me, and I think to every Jew, is that, dear fellow Jews, we love you, but you are on your own. So this is why I'm here today. It's very uneasy, but I'm resolute, because silence is complicity, and the virus of anti-Semitism thrives when people look away. I'm grateful for your work. And I urge you to continue not just studying anti-Semitism, but to confront it, to protect Jewish students, families, and Jewish lives across the Commonwealth. And anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem, it's a societal disease that threatens the moral fabric of every democracy. And actually, before I came here, something came to my mind. Is I read a quote by Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon said that treatment of Jews in any country is a thermometer of its civilization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the commissioners or comments? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Shikar.
I want to thank each of you for sharing just the deeply personal journeys that you've had with us, some of which really transcend what's happening in Massachusetts and what this commission may be able to do in terms of addressing anti-Semitism. But I think, at least for me, it helps inform really the experiences and the trauma that our community is facing. My specific question is, I was really struck, Eliana, by people saying to you they'd never met a Persian Jew before. Were there really Jews in Persia? It really it hit close to home for me, because I've heard the same thing about having family, my family coming from Iraq. And it made me think in the context of what we've been hearing earlier today about the need to share who the Jewish people are, where we're from, as being a really key component of allyship. And I wanted to put that challenge out to the three of you about how this commission might be able to build on that and build on the diversity of the Jewish community that you so beautifully expressed in terms of what we sort of set as our aspiration for understanding and dialogue through this report.
Thank you for this question. So there's obviously many things that we can do, and a lot of it is actually incorporated already in your report, which is excellent. If there's a couple of things that I do think would come to mind, and I think we've had these conversations in the past. One is inclusion, first of all, understanding that there is a wider community here that is not just American Jews or Ashkenazi American Jews, but there's actually a lot more. I didn't say it here, but to that delegation that I brought to the State House, I brought a Yemenite Jew, a lady, very dark-skinned, and the legislator asked her, "Are you even Jewish?" So there's a bit of gap of understanding, and I think including us more would help. Second, and I did write that in my comments to your staff, was don't refer to us just as a faith. We are an ethnicity. We are primarily an ethnicity. And when I hear a lot of I call it, thank you, sir, may I have another, Jews that we hear occasionally on these panels, is that we have to understand that there is a primarily tied in Jewish identity, Jewish as the people of Israel, not just Israelis, but the people of Israel, which are, a lot of us are here, to the land of Israel, right? I mean, when Moses went in front of the burning bush, there were two sentences that were told to him by God, is go to your people, I will free them from slavery and take them to the land, the promised land. He didn't say, I'll give you the Ten Commandments. He didn't talk about kosher food or tikkun olam. It was all about our connection to our ancestral land. And that's where identity comes primarily from. That's why we are a people and ethnicity, not just a faith. If one thing that you can fix, it's public education. Okay, it is.
Fix public education.
So yeah.
All right.
Altogether. When we came here and my daughter was born, I made the point of living in Brooklyn. I made a point of putting her through public education. I wanted the diversity. I wanted the experience of, I don't live in a bubble of Jews or Israelis. I wanted everything. Today, she's now in law school across the river, and I told her, don't you dare put your future children in public education. Go to a Jewish day school. So unless you fix it, I'm sure that you guys can do it, but it's just horrible. What we've witnessed here in one of those amazing panels that you've had, it's just disastrous.
I want to thank ICAN for sending the suggestions for the K through 12 recommendations. As you know, we incorporated many of those. With respect to what you said, which is very similar to what Warren Jacobson said earlier about how we describe the Jewish people, there have been changes made to that language already in the version that's going to be released today. We'd appreciate your feedback about how we could further improve or make more accurate that portion. With respect to the Holocaust education issue, I want to, again, thank DESE for the survey that they've done to help enlighten us on that data. Really important that we have a department that not only tries to do what it can to carry out the law, but also is helping us kind of with accuracy determine the extent to which it's being carried out. There are specific recommendations in this draft regarding Holocaust education and how we might be able to close those gaps. With respect to BDS in particular. That has been something that's been discussed to some extent on our at our commission meetings. Not as much as maybe some would like, maybe more than others would like. I can tell you my personal view is that BDS measures are morally reprehensible, wrong, and probably almost always illegal under federal law. I can't tell you right now the extent to which we're going to address BDS, but I do want to raise up that there have been many, in fact, I would say most or almost all of the most prominent higher ed institutions in Massachusetts have made statements and taken actions against attempts at BDS measures in Massachusetts already, including probably most recently, to my knowledge, University of Massachusetts Amherst. To the extent that my colleagues and I in the legislature take further action on that, it's not likely to be and could not actually be technically through this commission, but it's something that I know a lot of us are thinking about. So I appreciate your comments.
If I may just comment quickly on the anti-BDS. So we personally authored the bill that has passed in California years ago. It was the first, so California, under Governor Brown. Or was it Newsom? I think it was Brown. Sorry? And we actually provided a very similar version because we worded it as an anti-discrimination law, not necessarily, BDS. So it actually passes the muster of the First Amendment challenges. And I think we worked with Rep. Howitt here years ago on trying to pass it. It never got out of committee. So it didn't even get the benefit of a vote. With respect to BDS, I can tell you that personally I suffered from it. Actually, they tried to impact my business. I had to go and talk to the Undersecretary of Commerce in Washington to get it fixed. They actually launched an investigation against the perpetrator, and it helped. But to go, how many people can get access to a federal infrastructure like this?
Robert, you also mentioned at the beginning of your remarks the contributions of Jewish and Israeli Americans to Massachusetts itself.
Yeah.
And I think so often, including on things, occasions when we celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month, sometimes we overemphasize anti-Semitism. A counterexample of that was the event that the governor convened at the last Jewish American Heritage Month, and Benny Sharoni, the consul general, made, I think, what I thought were really inspiring remarks as he went through in great detail the many contributions that Jewish Americans and Israeli Americans have had and continue to have in Massachusetts. And I think that, again, loops back to what Warren Jacobson was saying earlier. It's very important that folks understand who Jews are and how they're incorporated into our current society, and the same goes for Israelis. Speaking of Israelis, we have had some pushback from members of the public about the number of times that we include the word Israel or in Israelis in our report. That number of times will not be diminished. It would only probably be expanded in any further drafts.
Mr. Chair, can I add something? Thank you all. Thank all three of you for your testimony. And Mr. Levin, I sit before you as a 39-year police officer, past 13 as chief, and frankly, I'm ashamed and angered by what you and your wife had to go through. It is my hope that my work on this commission helps educate, enhance law enforcement, so we never have an encounter like that again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions and comments? Yes, Commissioner Friedman.
I want to personally thank all of you for doing this. I know it's not easy, and I think we would all agree that hearing from immigrants today, it's a finale. This is not a footnote. I have a comment and then a question for you. The comment, and this is something perhaps we can talk about in the final report, is I said in our very first meeting more than a year ago that my strong sense is that Israeli Americans have borne the biggest brunt of anti-Semitism and had the worst time. And that's awful, and I think that in many ways our community has failed, the Israeli-American community. The flip side that I think we should emphasize somewhere in the report on education and otherwise is that you actually have additional legal protection that someone like me born in America doesn't, which is protection against national origin discrimination. And when people do the despicable things they've been doing to you, they're breaking federal and state law. And I think it's helpful. We don't need to pass a new law to say that. That is the law today. I think we may already say it, but we should make sure in our report to emphasize that discrimination against people because of their national origin is illegal, and people should be trained on that. That's my comment.
In the federal, yes, in the state level. That's part, what calls the BDS law as well. National origin discrimination.
Well, thank you, and we can study. There's some proposals on state education law 151C to clarify that and others. My question is actually mostly for Eugene. This is something that I don't think will be in our report, but just to educate the world, there's a lot of language and discussion today, post-October 7th, and even before that, that I believe emanates from the Soviet Union in the 1970s, when we hear Zionism is racism, anti-Zionism is anti-racism. A lot of the things that are being said on campuses by kids who weren't born in the 1970s were birthed in the 1970s by Soviet Union as propaganda. And I'm interested in hearing your perspective on that and in ideas you have to help educate people who may be well-meaning, who may think that they're helping to fight a justice fight, that actually the words they're saying are literally anti-Semitic words that were used against Jews by the Soviet Union.
Well, I grew up hearing these words. I mean, I can go back as far as I can remember, maybe the 3rd grade in a Soviet school, where I would be singled out, and here is the Jew, and it continued up until we left, and the Jews in Soviet Union, they couldn't really do much. You could just get tough, and I would fight, like when I got older, and then I found out that if I fight, I would be the one who would be punished, and the ones who came up to me and said, "Oh, you're a dirty Jew, and you are, this and that," they wouldn't be punished. So, how do we fight this? I mean, if I had an answer on how do we fight this, we'd probably solve the centuries-old question of anti-Semitism. I mean,
I trust you'll let us know. I trust you'll let us know.
Well, my way of starting to, I guess, fight and educate was I produced a documentary called Baltic Truth. So it started when I went to Latvia to visit the mass grave of my grandfather's family and the Jews of the town. And I was there many times. And on one of the trips in 2014, I noticed there was a new monument right next to the Jewish grave. So I walked over to take a look at it, and to my surprise, it said, "Long live Latvian national partisans, you gave your life in fight for freedom of Latvia against communist oppression." And I had nothing against it. But then I looked at the names on the gravestones. And a couple of the names, I couldn't believe they were there. So one of the names was Vilis Tunkelis, and everybody knows that he was in charge of execution of the Jews of that town. And he is buried with the honors right next to the Jews he killed. So to me, this was absolutely mind-blowing. So that little story ended up in a documentary called Baltic Truth. And I think this was my way of educating the world. Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Commissioner Burton.
Thank you. I just want to really thank the panel and the chairs for this opportunity. I think it's really wonderful, the chairs, how you have made space for the diversity of the Jewish community to be heard over the course of this process over the last year. And for this panel, Rob, who I know very well, we have long conversations. The ways in which the different parts of our community and the different experiences we have, whether we are first generation or fifth generation, or in my case, I don't know, 400 years in this country, the ways in which we experience this country differently and the ways in which we experience anti-Semitism differently are really important, and I'm really glad that we have made this space to lift it up. And so I really just want to thank this panel for sharing your perspectives and your experiences, which I know are different from those of some of this panel's members who are Jewish or from other members of our Jewish community. And we have a responsibility to every part of our Jewish community in the course of this process. I do want to just name something because we're reaching the end of the process. We only have one more hearing, because I heard something that concerned me, and I don't want to take it into the final report. My colleague made reference to the possibility that maybe Israeli Americans experience anti-Semitism worse than all other Jews, or than most other Jews. And I think it behooves us to be careful in the competitive who experiences anti-Semitism worse within the Jewish community. And without in any way diminishing and fully respecting the unique and particular experiences of Israeli Americans that experience anti-Semitism, which I recognize and want to affirm. We have heard over the course of the year from others, and I think the chairs have done a really excellent job of naming that competitiveness in this space is not productive. We have had panelists in the past who've come in who tried to pit anti-Jewish racism as less important than other kinds, and the chairs have rightly pushed back on that. And we have also heard from presenters in public testimony and in panels who have spoken to the particular experiences of other parts of the Jewish community, not only the immigrant communities. For example, we have heard testimony from those who've talked about Orthodox kids who've been chased and harassed in the streets because they wear, visibly Orthodox garments. We have heard from progressive Jews who are secular and fifth-generation American who've been chased out of certain progressive spaces because of the politics of that, frankly, some of the early panels heard today. So I just want to be very cautious and just say that all the ways in which all parts of the Jewish community experience anti-Semitism are a problem, and all of them are valued and appreciated by this commission, fully appreciating as well what has been presented to us today. So thank you.
Thank you. And one thing, there may be another question, but one thing, Robert, is the commission will speak through its final report. There have been times when I've vigorously disagreed with something that someone has said on a panel and have responded, as you've seen, and there have been other times that I have not. There have been other times that I've let others respond in a way that I would do myself. And then there have been other times when no one has responded, and that's been okay too. And there have been times when someone said something that I think I really agree with, and I don't say anything at all. We do have somebody online. Commissioner Blanter, online.
Yes, thank you. I just have a comment, particularly for Robert, who mentioned that there are no people coming out of other countries on the commission. That's not the case. I come from the same place as Eugene, former Soviet Union, and I just wanted to make the record, tell you that that experience here in the commission has been formative for me and incredibly important. And it's sometimes painful because some of the opinions that have been expressed during panels have been very different from mine. As a person coming from a former communist country, they were very difficult to hear. And Eugene, I watched your documentary and I just wanted to tell you how impressed I was. I'm sure it was very painful and difficult to speak, and the emotion is obvious, and I just wanted to thank you. That's all I have to say.
I think we have, Commissioner, I think we have time for one more question. Commissioner Friedman?
I just had a very brief comment. So I wanted to thank Commissioner Burton because you did reframe what I meant to say. I certainly don't mean to diminish the experience of any person. And you put it well. We experience anti-Semitism differently. When I hear the word intifada, I have my own interpretation, but I didn't live through an intifada. I didn't live being faced during an intifada by violence, or during an intifada having someone find the skull of a close friend. And that's what intifada means. And part of the report makes clear that when people have their own experiences, as in any other kind of discrimination, we credit their lived experience. We don't say, oh, you shouldn't listen to that word that way. You hear it wrong. we should credit it. And just clarification, I did check. Chapter 151B does prohibit discrimination based on national origin with respect to workplace, housing, and many other aspects. It's not an anti-BDS law, and there's other things that that would do, but Massachusetts law does currently forbid lots of kinds of national origin discrimination, so we should remind the world of that.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate your contributions.